You tried online dating?
Yes. Well, I think the thing was when I met my ex-husband, online dating wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
I met him through friends, and that's how you build a relationship. And obviously
the old days.
The good old days.
Yeah.
At the time when I met Hamish, I was a year out of my marriage.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't looking for someone to sweep me off my feet.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm prying. Tell us about your first date.
There was nothing sort of formal or stilted. It just felt like it flowed really nicely. It was a slow burn.
What did he reveal about himself?
Everything from his family situation where he told me his parents had passed away in a plane crash. So he was sort of left an orphan quite young and grew up in the foster system. There were hundreds and hundreds of conversations about finances and investing and money in his line of work and his career and what he was doing at the family office for some of the richest families in Australia. He told me he'd spent 16 years in America and he'd only come home about a year beforehand, rebuilding his career here, looking for a more simple life. The other thing to mention is the level of detail he went to when he did tell a big story. He went into detail about first and last names of people that worked with him on Wall Street, what floor they worked on, what department of what company they worked for, how he knew them, how old they were, their wives' names. This started from the day that we met. He created this long con of information and this presentation of who he was to have me believe that he was the perfect person to invest my life savings. It's like being in an illusionist show.
Yep.
So when you're sitting in the front row and the illusionist is doing all the tricks, you don't see any of them because you're in the front row. But if you're standing side of stage and you're watching these tricks happen, you can see everything that's going on.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Today we have a deeply personal episode from a person who found herself the victim of a fraudster who betrayed her trust in the most heartless way. Now, throughout my policing career, I locked up all types of criminals for horrendous crimes, but the one type of offender who always got under my skin were fraudsters. I just find them despicable human beings who deliberately prey on honest, hard-working people. The financial impact they have on the victims can be devastating, but more importantly, the loss of faith in human nature can have a deep impact. Today's guest, Tracy Hall, had her life destroyed by the actions of one man. As she described in a book, The Last Victim, I felt financially betrayed, emotionally destroyed, and stripped bare of everything I thought was real. But Tracy is not going to let a low life like Hamish McLaren define her life. She has spoken out about how this man came into her life, stole her heart, trust, and money. Tracy is an impressive person, hard-working, successful woman whose only mistake was putting her trust in a man who made his living deceiving people. Her story and other victim stories were covered in a hugely successful podcast series called Who the Hell is Hamish? Today, she has bravely agreed to come on the I Catch Killers podcast and share her story in the hope that others can learn from what she discovered on just how we all need to be careful with the trust we put in other people, even those we love. Tracy Hall, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Hey Gary, how are you?
Good. Look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to tell your story. I think it's we're all. I think we go through life and we all get meet people that their intent is probably not what they first portray, and we've all been victims of scams and frauds. So I think people are going to really buy into your story because I've read your book over the weekend, The Last Victim, and I've got to say I can see how you would be deceived when someone's so highly motivated to, this is the end game, I'll do what I have to do. It can really bring you unstuck. I've got to ask, but what motivates you to talk out about it? Because a lot of people that are victims of scams and that there's an embarrassment attached to it and they just want to let it pass by.
Yeah, 100%. It took me a long time to talk about it, to be honest. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. I was really trying to put the pieces together in my own mind about what had happened. And what I realised was that I had never really heard a story like this before.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started talking about it that people came to me and said, oh, that happened to my parents, or that happened to my auntie, or that happened to me. And I thought, you know what? These stories need to be told to educate people, to warn other people, and also to release people of the shame and embarrassment similar to what I felt, because it does happen more often than you think, and it can happen to anyone.
Yeah, when you talk the shame and embarrassment, it's funny, isn't it? Because we all like to think we're not naive and no one can pull the wool over our eyes, but it happens time and again.
Yeah, and it happens to, incredibly intelligent, well-travelled, educated people. Like it really can happen to anyone. And I think, sometimes the stories that you hear on the news, you have this picture of who might be someone that gets scammed. And quite often it's sort of a lonely middle-aged woman sitting in a lounge room looking for love on the internet, and suddenly she gives her life savings to an African prince. And those stories don't help, because most of us brush past them and say, well, that would never be me. I would never fall for that. And to be honest, I was one of those people. Yeah. And yet here I am. I lost my life savings to someone who pretended to love me.
Well, that's where what happened to you is a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's because it not only stole your finances, but your emotions. And I would imagine that hurts, if not more, at least just as much as losing the finances when you put your love and trust into someone.
I think that's a common theme, is that, finances are one thing. You can always make money.
Yeah.
If you're motivated, if you've got the right mindset, you can make money. It's the emotional betrayal and the emotional rebuilding that is the hardest, and building back trust in yourself, probably first and foremost, but also the world around you, because for me, for example, I'd never come across anything like Hamish.
Yeah.
I'd never been exposed to someone who was so callously deceiving me intentionally for their own financial gain. And so everything you think about the world comes unstuck.
Yeah, it makes sense. I often think about how people become victims of what happened to you, or other scams, or where people have been just plain and simple taken advantage. I've been a cop for a long time, so I'm not naive in what people are capable of, but I still like to see the good in human nature, and I can't believe someone would be so motivated to rip people off, basically take things from them. And I think that's where we come unstuck, because if you are, and we've got to go through life, you don't want to suspect everyone. We want to go through life putting a degree of trust, because most people are good, genuinely good. But it's that aspect that they prey on, because they don't think anyone would be aware of how deceptive they can be.
Yeah, and if you don't suspect somebody, you're not looking for those red flags.
Yeah.
I think we all go through life trusting people. I talk a lot about there are these invisible contracts of trust that exist within our society that makes the world work. You go to the doctor, you don't ask to see their medical degree. You trust that they are going to prescribe the right medication for you because of their qualifications. You drive down the road and you trust the person coming in the other direction knows the road rules, has their license, hasn't been drinking. You get on an aeroplane, you don't swing left with your portable breathalyzer and, ask the pilots to do a quick test, because you trust that they are abiding by the rules and regulations that we have in our society to make it work. And then, so we have these kind of like, these moments where people prey on that trust when you're not suspecting it, because most of the time we do go throughout life thinking the best of people, and most times people have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
It's just the ones that don't, that, like you said, do prey on that that spot in you that doesn't suspect.
And we've got to try and find that balance between a little bit of suspicion attached, not too naive, but also be able to go through life trusting people. And you want to be able to do that. You talked about red flags, and I notice in your book you refer to them at the time. They're just flags with the benefit of hindsight. And let me tell you, we're all very wise with the benefit of hindsight. I wouldn't have done that. But you don't know unless you're in that situation. And I think with your situation too, it was you weren't looking out for a person that wasn't part of your life. You let this person into your life, and he manipulated that situation so he was part of your life. So the very person that you put your most trust in is the one that's deceiving you. So it's so cruel.
And from my experience and this particular experience, the level that was gone to, the level of detail that was gone to create a persona, a fake persona, knowing that, if he was this person, I would fall more deeply in love with him and trust him more, was even more callous in a lot of ways because he created different people, like a different persona for different people. So he just found out what it was exactly that would, get me to trust him and love him. And he just doubled down on that.
It's creepy. I hope that's probably not a very appropriate word, but it's creepy that someone can go to...
It's cruel.
Go to that extent.
Yeah.
The way I want to tell your story, and if you're happy with it, I'd like people just to hear it in a chronological flow.
Sure.
So we'll talk about obviously how it all ended, but let's talk about you as a person. So growing up, let's get a sense of who you were.
Oh, wow, we're going way back.
Yeah.
I had a pretty average upbringing, I'd say, very, working middle class. I have two brothers, one either side of me. So I grew up playing a lot of sport. If I couldn't catch a footy, I was out of the family pretty much. So lots and lots of sport, very kind of wholesome upbringing, northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland. And, my parents both worked really hard. We had a great education, and I've travelled a lot. So I did the obligatory couple of years overseas.
Couple of gap years?
Yeah, straight after, got the backpack and went to London. Did that and came back and went to university in northern New South Wales studying sports science.
Right.
I mean, just study something you love, I reckon. Yeah. So that's what I did. And I ended up in sports marketing and travelled down to Sydney in 1998, straight after uni, and got a job at the Olympic Stadium. Yeah. Which was a dream, working on that as they were building it.
In the build-up for the 2000 Olympics.
Yeah, and building the stadium and getting it all organised and the membership base and the marketing and the website and all of that back in the late 90s was pretty cool. And then all of the events that led into the Olympics to test the stadium. So I saw some of the biggest sporting events in the world. Like, it was incredible. And then, of course, the Olympics. So, it had sort of set my career up that way and moved on through to finance. Worked for a hedge fund. Worked in telco, and more recently worked in global tech companies. So eBay and GoDaddy, Afterpay, Block. Yeah. Okay,
so for all intents and purposes, life was pretty interesting, and a good childhood. Grew up, and things were going well for you, and the excitement of the Sydney Olympics. I obviously live in Sydney, and I worked at the Sydney Olympics, and it was just a great time. Wasn't it?
It was an amazing time.
Being involved in that and the lead up to it, and I can see why you're so excited. You talk about the work in marketing and different things you did. I've got to ask, because you made reference to it in the book, and I'm going off topic here, but I'm just curious. The virtual shopping.
Oh, yeah.
Talk us through that. What was that about?
Well, so it was when...
And I'm saying this with someone that still gets nervous doing online shopping on their phone, so I was just curious.
It's all right. You're all good. Well, it was when the virtual reality, the headsets were coming out, and what we were seeing at eBay was a really huge spike in people buying the headsets, and mostly for gaming, to be honest. But what it was bringing about was some technology that sort of started to open up a virtual world. And what we did was we created a virtual reality department store where you could shop with your eyes. Yeah. So you put the headset on, and you literally just use your eyes, and it tracked your eyeball. And if you held your eye on something for long enough, it would pull up that item, and then you could adjust the sizing, the colour, whatever it might be, and then you could add it to cart, and then you could check out with your eyes.
Wow.
So it was a very immersive experience. There was obviously sound. There was some of those dizzy things that went on. I don't know. I get a bit dizzy when I do it. But it was a world first, and we created it. The code was written from scratch. It was something that had never been done before, and I ended up taking it over to the US, to the eBay team over in the US, and showcasing it over there in a big conference. So it was an incredible project to work on.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was fun.
Did it take off? Did it?
Well, the challenge is not everyone has the headset. So in terms of the being able to access it, and then of course we worked with a huge department store in Australia, and so you need the these brands to be working with you. One of the challenges was the the items needed to be rendered in terms of having that 360-degree look. So it wasn't just a picture flat on a page. It was a completely
had to look at it
three-dimensional rendered. So every product needed to be 360 rendered like that. Now, that's a pretty expensive and long process to go through for a very small portion of people that would actually end up doing it. It was really more of a, a PR opportunity to show what's possible in the future, and that a company like eBay, who was one of the very first e-com sites, actually was progressive in their thinking about what the future of shopping might look like. I think another challenge is shopping, for a lot of people is a very social event. So to do that in your lounge room on your own privately can be quite a lonely experience.
Taking the experience away.
Yeah. So it was sort of, how do you circumnavigate that with technology, and how do you create that? But, certainly, it's definitely something that could be possible in the future. It's just it's a long journey.
Okay, well, I was very curious about it, but I think it also gives a sense of who you are. Like, we haven't, the person that's fallen in love with the Nigerian prince that just needs $100 so he can get his $200 million. You're not that person. You've grown up, healthy family, active family, social life, travelled overseas, working in businesses, cutting edge, Sydney Olympics. You're a worldly person, not a naive person. Is that a fair way to describe Tracy at that stage?
That's definitely how I would see myself, and incredibly lucky to have all of these experiences and see and do what I've done in my life. Yeah.
You weren't walking around with blinkers just waiting for someone to show you attention and you just fall immediately. So,
no. And I think it's fair to say that, at the time when I met Hamish, I was a year out of my marriage. Yeah. And I was going through the divorce and the separation. And, a year post that, I felt like I was ready. I definitely wasn't looking for someone to sweep me off my feet, or I definitely wasn't looking for another husband. No thanks. And, I was in my early 40s, so having more children was probably off the cards as well. Yeah. So it wasn't like I was desperately looking for those things. I was just looking for somebody to share my time with, somebody who had similar values and morals to me, some companionship, and, just to kind of restart that side of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long were you married for?
I think we were married for 8 years, but together for like 13 or something like that.
And then you had a daughter to that marriage?
Yes, I had a daughter. So she was born in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you've separated, going through all the dramas that come, the emotional dramas, the financial separation, everything that happens, a divorce, so that can be brutal. And, you said 12 months it takes you to recover. That's, I suppose that's about an average sort of time. And then you've got your life in order. You've got a place that you're living in. You're living with your daughter.
Yep.
Everything's going fine, but you've decided that, it's time to get back into the world of living a life. You tried online dating?
Yes. Well, I think the thing was, when I met my ex-husband, online dating wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
I met him through friends, and that's how you build a relationship. And obviously
the old days.
The good old days. Yeah. And so I was re-entering a world, where this was very new to me. And at that time I was working a huge job at eBay. I was working long hours, building virtual reality department stores. I was, almost solo parenting. I had my child most of the time. Still working through the divorce. These things take a long time. So, I wasn't going out really at all, and I was pretty aware that some awesome guy wasn't going to drop through my ceiling while I was watching maths on a Monday night. I had to do something. And, at that stage of your life, your friends are all coupled up, and, it's hard to meet people. So what do you do, So I started, I plunged headfirst into the Sydney dating pool via dating apps.
I'm smirking here because I found it funny in your book that your friends were living vicariously through you with your successes and disasters on online dating.
Yeah.
So it's a brave new world. I have no understanding about it. I can relate to watching MAFS because when my relationships have been in bad times, I watch that because that makes me feel better.
Yeah, it's pretty dire viewing.
Look at all the dysfunction there and go, oh well, hey, I'm not that bad. So I understand that. So I think a lot of people get the sense of who you were at the time. That okay, you've been through, you've had your ups, you've had your downs, you've successful career, but you're getting back into a social life and starting to live life again after your marriage separation. What was it about Max? Let's refer to him as Max.
Yeah.
What was it about Max? Talk us through the first contact, how it happened, and just talk us through how the relationship developed.
Well, I think, it was pretty slim pickings back in 2016, if I'm honest. From what I hear, it's still slim pickings now. But, there was, I swiped right on him because his photos looked like he just looked normal, you know, and he had, megawatt smile, he had National Geographic blue eyes, and, in these photos, he was doing things that it seemed, that he liked doing. He was running, he was surfing, he was, just sort of...
He didn't have a photo with his shirt off, which is...
No, and there were no sedated tigers in Thailand. There was none of that action going on, and he wasn't wearing a Von Dutch hat. So, things were looking okay. Yeah. So I swiped right. He just looked normal, I guess. And it was funny because he'd reached out to me and I didn't get back to him for like 3 weeks or something. I don't know. I was distracted and busy and working and whatever I was doing. And so our very first contact was him having a bit of a jab at me saying, oh, he finally decided to have a chat to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what started in terms of our connection was there was this really good banter. Yeah. And it was great conversation on the chat. And obviously then we moved on to a phone call and then we agreed to meet for a dinner. But this all took quite a long time because I was in a situation where I was working a lot and I was looking after my child most of the time. So I didn't really, and I think I say it in the book, you have actually at that stage of your life little time for actual dates and even less time for dickheads. So you don't want to be spending your time with someone that is not, is not kind of connecting with you in some way. So, we had this connection and he had what seemed to be a very similar sort of Aussie upbringing around the same time, in the 70s and 80s. So we had a lot of common reference points. His banter was great. There was great chat, lots of laughs, very Aussie, bit of a larrikin.
And
so
this is over a period of how long, Tracy? This was...
Well, I think we connected. I don't think we met after we connected on the app, so probably about a month, maybe something like that, maybe even longer. I can't remember now, but I remember it being quite a long time. So there was a lot of time to go back and forth and have these conversations and then, of course, talk on the phone.
Okay, can I just make the point here because I want people to sort of really live what you were going through there. That would give you some comfort too, wouldn't it? It's not the type of person, why didn't you respond, and then sends you 100 texts and you haven't responded in 5 minutes and where have you been type thing. So even that sets up a base of normality, of confidence. Well, this person's not a try-hard. He's taking his time and it's just moving at a reasonable pace. Is that fair to describe how it was going?
It felt... It felt really comfortable and it didn't feel pushy, like you said. It just felt really normal. He seemed to understand, the situation I was in, my corporate life, the life I had with my daughter, and he wasn't sort of pushing into that. It was like, whenever you've got time or do you have time and we'll catch up for a meal. Yeah. And that's sort of how it progressed. And it was like, okay, well, in a couple of weeks' time, I've got this night. And that's what we agreed to meet.
Okay, so the exchange via the text messaging, then a conversation, and then a meal. describe us on. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm prying. Tell us about your first date.
This is what I did have to go through with the police when I made
maybe it's the policeman in me because I'm thinking, okay, tell us what happened on the first date.
That's it. So the first date, he came and pick me up in the city. He'd booked a restaurant. He'd planned the whole thing, which was great. It was like one less thing I had to sort of worry about. And after work that day, I went for a drink with a work colleague, and we were just down in the city where he was going to pick me up and having a drink. And he arrived early, and we had just ordered a drink.
Yep.
And I said, hey, we've just ordered a drink. Why don't you come in? You can meet my friend from work and then we'll go. And he was sort of like, oh, first of all, it was like, there's no parking here. It's a no parking zone. Don't worry about it. I'll just, I'll wait a few minutes.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to have to scull this. And I said, no, why don't you just come in? There's a park up around the corner. I told him where he could park. And he kind of got a little bit shirty.
Yeah.
But it's always hard to tell with text and when you've not met anybody.
Oh, it's near impossible.
Yeah, and he was like, look, if you just want to meet me at the restaurant, I'll just meet you at the restaurant, or we can do this another time. And knowing that it had taken so long to organise this one night because of my schedule, it was kind of like, oh, that's a bit, brash or a bit, it just felt a bit spicy. And anyway, I said, no, well, I'll finish up and I'll come out. And it was all about the fact he couldn't park and it was no parking zone and all of this. Anyway, we go up to the restaurant, which was in Potts Point. And I got in the car, and it was the first time I met him, and he was sitting down.
Yeah.
And I remember having a little bit of like a sinking feeling in my tummy because he just wasn't kind of like what he was in the photos, which, I mean, duh, nobody is. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm not what I look like in my photos either.
Yeah.
But I remember looking over in the car and thinking, oh, he's not all that.
I always thought with those dating apps, you'd be better off, wouldn't you, underplaying what you look like and then you look better than your picture. That would have to...
Yes.
It's just a theory, but...
I don't know. Maybe people don't get as many, I don't know, what do you call them, hits or like matches or whatever.
Okay, so you're breaking that down. You've gone for a drink with a girlfriend beforehand.
Oh, it was a guy from work,
that can't come in and... the reluctance, I'm trying to think if I was in his spot, I could make a good impression on the friend or whatever, come in and talk. So there was a reluctance for him to come in.
There was a reluctance for him to do that. It was all based on the fact he couldn't park or he'd been in a no parking zone. Anyway, I got in the car and I was like, oh, he's not all that. And then we went up to the restaurant in Potts Point and we couldn't find a park.
Yeah.
And ironically, he parked in a no parking zone. It doesn't matter, I'll just pay the fine. And I was like, but you're just really spicy about not parking. This is what was going on in my head. Yeah. And I was just like, oh. But, by that stage, we'd had a few laughs and it felt really comfortable. And I was like, oh, well, up to you.
Yeah.
It's your car, your license, your whatever. And we went for dinner and it was really nice. It was pretty casual. It was nothing fancy. It was just this beautiful Asian restaurant and had great conversation. I can't remember if he drank. He didn't drink a lot at all, the whole relationship. And I think I had a glass of wine and we ordered and we shared some food and we had a laugh. And it was a pretty quick dinner, actually. I was really tired.
Yeah.
I've been working really long hours and I think I yawned when he was...
That's not good, Tracy.
Well, I think he was monologuing about something. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm so tired. And he said, it's fine. We'll get you home. And there was no kind of like, oh, God, why are you so tired? It's only 9 o'clock. He was very caring and said, that's fine. We'll get you home. And he said, I'll put you in a cab. So we went, we left the restaurant, didn't get a parking ticket.
Yeah.
And that was our night. He put me in a cab and that was that.
And what's your impressions after that for the first catch up?
I thought it was a really nice meal.
Yeah.
We'd had great conversation. We'd connected. We found out a little bit more about each other. He was really interested in the work I was doing at the time, the virtual reality department store. He asked a lot of questions. He was a great listener. there was banter, it wasn't all serious. There was some laughs and it felt really easy and comfortable, and he had great chat, and that was that.
Okay, so you left that it would be nice to catch up with him again?
Yeah.
And who initiated that, or was it a mutual sort of let's do this again?
Yeah, it was probably in a text afterwards,
Yeah.
and it was probably something along the lines of, that was a really great dinner, thank you. Yep, love to do it again if you're up for it. Sure, yeah, I'm up for that. So it was very casual, like there was nothing sort of formal or stilted. It just felt like it flowed really nicely.
Okay, and how did the relationship progress past that point? It became more regular, or?
Yeah, well, it was kind of the time I had available were every second weekend, and then the odd night during the week, every couple of weeks or whatever. So we just planned it around my schedule. There was never any pressure for me to get babysitters or anything like that. It was very much in my hands, and so we just planned it around what my availability was, which, in retrospect probably suited him quite nicely because he was off doing a whole bunch of other things. But just whenever I was available, he would be available, and we'd go for meals, either in the city or somewhere close to work. And then on the weekends, I think the first sort of weekend experience we had together, he picked me up and we went up to Palm Beach, and he took the paddle boards and we went paddleboarding on Pittwater, and we walked up to Barrenjoey Headland and had a beautiful walk, and then, came back down, got some cheese and a beer and watched the moon rise over Avalon Headland, and then that was the end of the date. He dropped me home and went on back to Bondi himself.
Okay, so the pace, you were comfortable with the pace?
It was a slow burn.
Right.
Yeah, it was a very slow burn.
You wanted to move quicker, but it was just sort of, or it was the way you both were?
I think it was just the way we both were. I was still coming out of my separation and divorce, and I wasn't in a rush, and I wasn't in a rush to, like I said, I wasn't looking for another husband or to have more children or anything like that. So it was just, I was just really comfortable with the way it was. We had a great time. I knew that my circumstances and situation didn't allow much more than that.
Yeah.
So that was on me, which, it was what it was. And then he seemed comfortable with that.
What did he reveal about himself as this relationship was developing?
Oh, I mean, there are a lot of stories. And, this is over the course of sort of 6, 7, 9 months.
Yeah.
In the beginning, everything from his family situation where he told me his parents had passed away in a plane crash. So he was sort of left an orphan quite young and grew up in the foster system. So there was a lot of talk about that. There was a lot of talk about sort of, his career. Because, of course, we were working full time in corporate at this point, so it takes such a big portion of your day. So when you catch up at the end of the day, that's sort of, what happened at work today? What have you been doing? What have you been working on? And he told me he was a chief financial investment officer for a family office, so working on a lot of sort of alternative investments and hedge funds and things that I knew a little bit about, but not a lot. And so there was a lot of chit chat about his line of work and what he'd done in the States. He told me he'd spent 16 years in America and he'd only come home about a year beforehand. And he was sort of rebuilding his career here, looking for a more simple life and didn't want to be on Wall Street and all of this kind of crap. So lots of stories.
So
lots of stories.
We've got this, it's a heartstring puller that his parents died in the plane crash that he happened to survive, and then raised by a foster family. And then worked in New York for, was it 16 years? Was there during September 11. And lost a friend as he was walking to the tower to meet the friend. All these things, they're not unbelievable, but they're sort of, I get the sense that he was sort of drip feeding little bits and pieces about him, like about himself, creating this persona of the person. Because I see that there are times when he was unavailable or he was just sort of reclusive, and you're thinking, well, he's been through a lot of trauma in his life. This is just
make excuses.
And of course, we've just called him Max, but at this stage, you knew him as Max Tavita.
Tavita.
Yeah. did you see any documents with his name on it or anything?
I picked up mail from his letterbox
Yeah.
that was addressed to Max Tavita.
Because when I'm looking through the process of this, I'm thinking, well, if I started seeing someone that I liked, I wouldn't be checking their names or going through. Well, let's have a look.
When was the last time you asked someone for 100 points of ID when you met them?
I don't know, but after talking to you,
maybe we should.
Maybe it should be compulsory.
And it is interesting about the stories, because I think this is really important to mention, is that when you recount a story, you tell the whole story.
Yeah.
What's missed in that is that story came in probably 10, 12, 15 installments.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit each time. And so it's not until you look backwards that you go, that's the whole story. And oh my gosh, that seems so far-fetched. But at the time, when it's just a little piece of information and then the conversation moves on, and then 2 weeks later there's another piece of conversation that relates back to that story. Now, he was clever because everything matched.
Yeah.
But it was not like these stories came out in one go, because if they had, they would have seemed so crazy.
That's a good point,
you
Tracy.
know.
That's
But when I'm telling these stories, of course I tell them in one piece because it's the full story, and that's how we express how ridiculous these things are that he said. But in reality, they came in bits and pieces. And this is the death by 1,000 cuts. This is the coercive control that occurs, because had it have been in one go, you'd go, come on, mate.
Yeah.
Really? So I think that's important to mention, because it creeps up on you.
That's very important to mention, because you're quite right. If I put it all there and go, this is what he's told you, I'd be going, Tracy, look.
Yeah.
But if it's, have you got family? No, my parents passed away. That could be the first.
That was literally the first conversation.
Drop of it.
And then you move on to, what are we going to order for dinner?
I'm sorry your parents have passed away. And then plane crashes or planes scare me because of what's happened.
Yeah.
And I can that's a valid point. And that's and that's how they manipulate. That's how they do it. You can't present with all these things up front. Even like over in New York. Well, he worked in New York for 16 years. Good chance he was there during September 11th.
Yeah, I just had to put the dates together, and it wasn't unusual. I mean, that was a big story, but there's this thing, you make the lie so big that you can't not believe it.
Yeah.
Because the other thing to mention is the level of detail he went to when he did tell a big story. That story in particular, when I asked him, it wasn't like, I was there and the plane hit and I was under and I had to run away and that's the end of the story. He went into detail about first and last names of people that worked with him on Wall Street, what floor they worked on, what department of what company they worked for, how he knew them, how old they were, their wives' names, their first and last names. Like, there was so much detail that he went into when telling that story that you can't just go, come on.
It gives it some credibility, doesn't it? If the way someone's relaying a story.
But it was completely made up. So I don't know, maybe he'd told the story before, maybe he just made it up on the spot, maybe he was playing a game with himself to see how clever he could be and how, nothing faltered and everything lined up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange.
It's incredible talent in one degree.
Well, he's been a fraudster and living a large portion of his life ripping people off. So he had to have some skills in that area. Did you do, because most people these days jump on social media and have a look around? Did you were you curious to what his profile was on social media?
100%. Yep. I think you should always deep stalk people that you're about to meet.
Don't call it stalking. We talk against stalking on this show, but I think everyone does it.
Yeah. I think you should investigate people that you're looking to meet that you've never met before. So yes, of course I did. He had preempted that.
Yep. And
he said, I'm not on social media. I don't agree with it. I don't want anyone to know stuff about my life. I want a private life. There was, and again, it was a story that went with it and an excuse. Now, it's one thing not to have a social media profile. Yeah. At that time, Kath didn't have a social media profile. Yeah. She wasn't even on LinkedIn. So I do have friends that don't have a social media profile, and that's fine. That's everyone's choice. what was weird was that there was no digital footprint of Max Tavita.
Right.
So yes, I did search, and again, I think I go into this in the book. It would be after we'd met, which was like generally a dinner.
Yeah.
It'd probably be like 10 or 11 at night. I'm lying in bed. I'd just done a big day, and I'm searching up things that he may have said just to double check or just to research or what have you, and nothing would come up. And, Max Tavita doesn't exist online. There is no digital footprint of Max Tavita because he actually is a fictitious character. But at 11 or 11:30 at night when I'm exhausted and nothing comes up and I'm scrolling and I do another search and I end up putting the phone on the side bench and going to sleep, and then at 6 a.m. the next day that it all starts again.
You're back in work.
Yeah, and you get distracted and you're busy. And I think this is a really interesting thing, is that vulnerability can come in a lot of ways. And, I was vulnerable at the time because I was going through a divorce, but I was also distracted.
Yep.
I was tired. I was bringing up a child pretty much on my own. I was, there was a lot going on, and, I didn't have hours to sit there and trawl through the internet trying to find. But yes, I did. I checked out plane crashes, 1975, 1978 plane crashes, whatever date he told me it was. And I'd look and I couldn't find anything. And then, of course, again, it's 11:30 at night and I'm thinking, I've just got to go to bed. And then life moves on.
And you're balancing all that up. And I understand all the chaos of just getting through life with all the things that you got going. But, okay, you're not getting the footprint on social media or digital, but there's a real person. There's a person telling you, well, he does exist because he's sharing my bed with me. I know he's there. It's not... or it doesn't appear to be fictional. How did the relationship progress? When did it become that you call yourself a couple, or you're exclusive to each other, and how did that evolve?
I don't know, because I don't know in your 40s, like, are you my boyfriend now?
What do you call someone in your
a partner?
I think partner's more appropriate.
I don't know.
You didn't ask him, are you going round with me?
Yeah, will you go out with me? Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, it was pretty much from the moment I met him. Yeah. I wasn't seeing anyone else. I was spending all my spare time with him that I could. I was very much invested in the relationship. From his point of view, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it sort of progressed over time. It was a very intimate, emotionally intimate relationship. Physical intimacy was sort of like that, took a lot longer. He was kind of a bit weird in that way. So
yeah, I saw in the book you questioned him about that, and he came up with it's a slow burn. I like it this way.
What starts what did he say? What starts with a bang ends in a fizzle. Yeah. I was like, well, that's pretty big fizzle in the end. But
no,
look,
bang and just a shocking
no
fizzle.
Bang, just a big fizzle. Look, that was just him. But I guess the relationship felt incredibly safe because, the conversations we had were at such a deep level. He sort of presented this level of emotional intelligence and empathy and compassion. And, remember, he was a phenomenal listener. Yeah. So he just had to listen to the things I was saying and present those back to me. And that felt very intimate and close and, very secure, very safe.
And it was like you were both exposing yourself, emotionally exposing yourself, and you felt secure in that. And it got to the point where you introduced your daughter to him?
Yeah. After quite a while, I introduced her because I was on the phone to him a lot. Yeah. And she'd often overhear a conversation.
How old was she at the time?
She was, she would have been 5.5, 6, okay. 6, something like this. And she just knew as Max on the phone, and, he was very engaging. Yeah. So he called her, rascal, and, hey, what's the rascal up to? And, every time he'd come and see me or meet with me, he'd bring a little packet of chocolate freckles to leave for her, and just really what I thought were thoughtful things at the time. And so they would have this conversation on speaker quite a lot, but it did take a long time for me to introduce him to her, because I would just see him when I you know, when I had spare time when she was with her dad. So, you know, and they got along really well. I mean, he just sort of matched her energy. He was very engaging. He's very knockabout kind of jovial guy. So, you know, there were a lot of laughs and a lot of banter again, which, you know, that suited her personality.
It's a very good way to your heart, isn't it? If you've got a child and the child enjoys spending time with Max, it's, yeah, okay.
If someone engages with your child and shows interest and it's easy, then that's a tick.
Yeah.
We didn't really spend weekends together or anything like that. It was always, you know, holidays is when they spent the most time together, which sort of happened, you know, more towards the end of the relationship. My mum came on holidays with us. He built a relationship with my mum, with my family. You know, so there was a bit of closeness there as well.
A couple of things where he made excuses late or last moment excuses not to meet with your friends or you know, commit to a function and not turn up to a function. You look back now and again with all that pieced together, but at the time, you know, he was a investment banker or the work that he was doing and he was busy all the time and these things happen. So what do you talk us through that where you'd line up to meet your friend? I love your friend. What's her name?
Kath.
Yeah, like she's the best. We've got to get her in the police. She spotted him a mile away.
She did. She did. Her spidey senses were going off from the beginning. Yeah. And you know, Kath's incredible. I've known her for nearly 20 years, and you know, the way that Greg Bearup described it in the podcast was it's like being in an illusionist show.
Yep.
So when you're sitting in the front row and the illusionist is doing all the tricks, you don't see any of them because you're in the front row. But if you're standing side of stage and you're watching these tricks happen, you can see everything that's going on. And Kath was standing side of stage.
Okay, that's a very good way of describing it. And I can understand you would have been seeing Max and reporting back to Kath going, this happened, that happened, and she'd be going, oh, that's strange. That's strange. So, the death of the parents in the plane crash and he happened to survive and woke up unconscious and, you know, all the tragedies and all that. She's getting that all in one lump, looking from further away.
Yeah.
But tell us about because I like her attitude. Like she was a good friend, like she's really tried to go, hey, just take a step back.
Yeah. And Kath is a really curious person and she always asks a lot of questions. So where some friends or, you know, some relationships you're like, oh, how's Max? And you go, yeah, good. We're going for dinner or we're going to Byron next weekend or whatever. That would be the end of the conversation. Whereas Kath follows up with questions and constantly curious about what's going on. And of course her senses were going off as well. So she was trying to get information and really trying to understand. And she was listening to all of this stuff and, you know, to the point where she took me for breakfast one morning, and I write about this in the book. And Kath, like I said, I've known her for best part of 20 years. I've never seen this woman cry, not once. And she's sitting across the breakfast table from me and she's holding my hand and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she's going to tell me she's got cancer or something bad has happened. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I don't know how to say this to you, Trace, but I just don't think Max is who he says he is. I'm really worried about you investing your superannuation with him.
Yeah.
Now, she is the only person I told I was doing that because probably she was the only one that asked. But also, too, we don't talk about our money. We don't talk about who we're investing with. We don't talk about how much we earn. You know, it is a taboo subject in a lot of ways. It's private. And she was asking those questions and getting that information, and she was so worried because in the background she was writing to MIT and these companies that he said he'd worked for in America, and she was trying to get employee records and trying to see whether he was actually a student at that university. And she was trying to do her own background. This is where she would be great in the place. She was building a dossier of her own. But yet at this point she didn't have anything. She just knew it wasn't quite adding up.
Just didn't feel right.
Didn't feel right. And she says to me, you know, I'm just really worried. And I said to her, and this is the other thing, you know, she hadn't met him.
Yep.
And I said to her, Kath, but you haven't met him. You don't know, don't know him like I do. You haven't heard the conversations we've had. He's got my back. He's got my best interests at heart. You'll see when you meet him.
You're in your love bubble too.
Of course, I had my rose-colored glasses on, and I wanted her to get to know him the way that I did. He was very socially awkward. So getting him to meet friends, because he had reneged on so many different occasions, was tricky. And I didn't have a lot of availability either. So when I was available or I had a schedule, we wanted to spend time together.
Yeah.
So that was a difficult thing. But anyway, we finally got a time to have dinner, and had dinner with her and her husband. And, she just peppered him with questions. And, her husband walked away going, "Oh, if you weren't so suspect on him, I think he was a really great guy."
Yeah.
And of course, she was building this folder of information about him so that she could hand it to me, so that without any doubt, I would believe what she was saying, because she knew that I was so in love with him, and she didn't want to ruin our friendship either. This is a 20-year friendship. This is not something you throw down the toilet.
And if she pushed too hard, it would almost be, well, you've got to make a choice between him and me. And
I would have defended him, or I would have tipped him off.
Yeah.
And so she knew she had to play it really carefully. But I'm so grateful for, the questions she asked me, and the fact she had the guts to take me for breakfast and say, "I'm really worried," because a lot of people wouldn't do that. They'd just sort of wait and see.
Hard conversation
really
to have.
And that's why she was crying.
Yeah.
Like, this is the most stoic woman you've ever met, and she's crying. So it obviously meant something to her, and that would have been a really, really hard time for her. And she was determined to protect me. And it was just, I guess, I don't know if luck is the right word, but he was arrested before she had a chance to give me that folder.
To get that across.
But she's also the one that sent me the video of
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the arrest. But how long had you been going out with seeing Max before she started to become sus?
I don't know when she first started to become sus, but when she took me for breakfast, I think it was early in 2017.
Yep.
So at this stage, it's nearly a year after we've been together. And it was when the conversations around the money started heating up. The self-managed super fund happened in early 2017. So I think that was what prompted her to have that chat with me at that time. But I suspect that she was sus on him for a very long time, just because of the stories I was recounting to her. His name, she said that's not.
I like her intuition there that Tavita is a island in the Pacific,
Tongan name,
and he's white.
Yeah. That was sus for her. I didn't know that cultural relevance or that reference, so I couldn't relate to that. Again, I probably did a quick search one night late on the internet about it, but I would say she was probably suspect fairly early on, but it did take her quite a while.
Her concern as a friend in that early stage, you'd have your heart broken, not then when it ramped up that now you're investing your finances, it's going to be more than your heart.
That's right.
Your finances.
That's what she was most worried about.
Okay. But just about the finances that he used to, 5 cars.
Well,
tell us all up, like what your impression. You thought, okay, he's got a bit of money, and then he'd flash it, but then he'd pull it back, and
and again, this is where the things come slowly. The death by thousand. So the cars appeared over time. It wasn't like, hey, I've got 5 cars, because I go, well, you're a jerk. Like, what?
Why would you have 5 cars?
Why? And I actually said that to him, because by the time I'd seen the 4th car that just sort of appeared one day, I was like, what single 40-year-old guy who lives in Bondi needs 5 cars? Like, you're just a jerk. Like, that's so excessive.
Yeah.
And the next conversation was, you know what, Trace, I've been thinking about what you said about the cars, and you're right. I don't need them. I'm going to get rid of a couple of them. And then suddenly they all started disappearing.
So he was just a chameleon that kept changing for whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure if I had been impressed by that,
you would have had 10 cars.
Yeah, probably would have given me a couple. I don't know, and put them in someone else's name. But, they sort of started disappearing. And, there were signs of wealth, but there were also signs of not wealth. And when I questioned those things, he had an answer for everything, right? So he lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Bondi. It was a beautiful apartment, but it was small. It was fairly
minimalist.
Yeah, minimalist, I'd say. And so I'd ask him about things, and he'd say, Trace, I've lived that life. This is the apartment I had in New York, and of course he's got the photos to show me. And he tells the stories, and over time told stories about this apartment, and he lived in that building and where it was and the whole thing. And he said, I've lived that life, and I came back to Australia to live a more simple life. He goes, all I want to do is go surfing, do my job, and spend my time with great people.
Now, when we apply the drip feed coefficient into that, it makes sense. Like when you're telling it, but you could see someone, he liked his surfing. You could, okay, I've just decided to change directions in life. So, it's, you can understand that if you're getting fed in the moment about
it all
this is
added
a life.
up. It all added up. And coupled with his persona and his desire to have a simple life and just do the things he loved, I could relate to that.
Yeah.
And, he's like, it's what I want to be doing.
Now, the how he got you to invest in what he was doing, again, that was done incrementally. It was done in small parts. Talk us through that.
Yeah. I mean, probably as backstory, there were hundreds and hundreds of conversations about finances and investing and money in his line of work and his career and what he was doing at the family office for some of the richest families in Australia, and reports and the Bloomberg monitors on, in his apartment, and, the office and the pictures from the office, and,
So the whole set up the whole thing.
It was like a movie,
Yeah.
right? And this started from the day that we met. The day that we first connected, the story was built over time, over conversations, over text messages, over phone calls, over reports and documents. And, he'd created this whole movie so that I believed that he was who he said he was.
Even phone calls.
Yeah, there were phone calls with people that I overheard, and I could hear the person on the other end about a trade that he needed to put through. So it was someone in his back office that was executing the trades for him. Claudia, I need to do this. What was the price of gold at close yesterday? What is it today? What's it likely to be? Have you modelled that? I need to put 15 on that and do, I don't know who these people, I still don't know who these people are. I don't believe they were real trades. But this, I witnessed all of this over a long period of time. So by the time there was a conversation about my superannuation and what I was doing with my super, what fund I was investing with, how much I was paying in fees, and then his point of view about that, everything kind of confirmed that he was a person who knew what he was talking about, had my best interests at heart, had my back, wanted me to be financially independent, and said to me, let me help you. And if he had knocked on my door 2 weeks after we met and said, hand over your superannuation, your life savings, everything you've got, I'm going to invest it for you, I said, bugger off.
Yeah.
Who are you? Like, I've met you 2 weeks ago. But he created this long con of information and this presentation of who he was to have me believe that he was the perfect person to invest my life savings.
Yeah.
So when he asked me and said, we should do a self-managed super fund for you because you'd get so much more return, you'd be financially independent quicker, you could, all of this stuff. And of course it was peppered with lots of compliments around, you're one of the hardest working people I've ever met. You work so hard, Trace. Like, you deserve this. And, really building me up. And so I thought it was the right thing to do. So we set up a self-managed super fund. He groomed me throughout that whole process, worked with a solicitor, presented all the documents to me, explained everything. The self-managed super fund was actually set up legitimately, had a constitution, everything was done correctly. I had to go and close down my superannuation fund and transfer that money into a business banking account that I'd set up. I needed all the documentation for the funds to allow that. And then what he got me to do was pull a check out of that business account And I believed I had a trading account set up at Bell Potter Securities. I'd filled in the paperwork. I'd had it submitted. And he said, write a check out to Bell Potter Securities. That's what I did, thinking it would go into my account. But I didn't put my name on that check. Bell Potter Securities, Tracy Hall Investments, or whatever the account was. And so it went into a washing account of his at Bell Potter Securities.
Right.
So that's how it happened.
And the way you describe it, and you use the word grooming, and I think that's an apt way of describing it. We usually do that with pedophiles, with children. But this is a different crime, but the same process. It is grooming. And like the effort that has to go to leave paperwork all around the desk and your computer screen open and talking business, talking shop on the phone. And the sense that I got, the way he got you in there, it was almost like, I'm doing you a favour, I'm not desperate for it. So it wasn't him saying, hey, I've just got a shortfall of funds, I need this. It was, look, if you want, I can help you. And the first one was like incremental too. It was $10,000.
Yes, that's
right. So that gives you the confidence. And then, surprise, surprise, the $10,000 doubled or whatever, and you come back and think, oh, maybe he does, or not maybe. I always knew he did. He knew his job, and so then it built up. And I've just got the you probably you'd remember it better than I would. I would imagine, but the amount of money. So just going through it and comment if you wish. But so it was 4th of October 2016 was $10,000.
Yeah,
and then you got a return.
That's right.
For that.
Yeah, and
then 10th of February 2017. 187,000.
That was my superannuation.
And talk to me about that. How did you just say, okay, let's move it all across?
So that was the self-managed super fund. So that was my 22-year career worth of superannuation, and that was completely transferred across to a self-managed super fund, which I then withdrew in a cheque for a trading account. But that trading account was not in my name. It went into an account of his. Right.
And then 3rd of April, 80,000 in 2017.
Yep.
12th of June 2017, 40,000.
Yeah. So they were some shares and some savings that I had accumulated, mostly shares that I'd earned through working in tech. And he, again, throughout the countless conversations we had about, Trump's antics and how that was impacting the US markets and what was going to happen. And it was at an all-time high. So you should cash those in and then we'll invest them and we'll diversify. And, he gave me the whole strategy and so encouraged me to do that. So that's what I did, and then transferred that to the self-managed super fund.
And this is 18 months into your relationship?
Almost 18 months, yeah.
And, you trust him, he's met your family, holidays, you're staying at each other's place. There was intimacy there, physical intimacy, everything that a relationship would be defined as. You're in this relationship. Talk about buying a house, moving to Byron Bay, going to look at the houses, like it
multiple houses.
Just bullshitting with the real estate agents, pointing out houses. I used to live this, or I used to own that house, and then why don't we buy this?
Yeah, we got contracts on houses. We saw floor plans. The level of it was just a game for him.
Yeah.
He didn't have a job. Like I was busy working 16-hour days trying to earn a living.
Yeah.
And he was doing all this on the side just as a bit of a game. So we'd go to Byron and travel throughout the Byron hinterland and look at house after house. I took my mum, I took my daughter with us.
Yeah.
And you imagine yourself, in a couple of years moving up there and having that life. And we spoke about it at length, those wee hours of the morning chats that you have about what you want your future to look like. And he just presented that back to me.
I sit here, it's just evil, isn't it? It's hard to even comprehend because I know those type of conversations where you're sitting down, planning your future. The excitement would have been coming out of the pores of your skin about I can see the life we've got, the future together.
Yeah.
And the whole time it was,
Yeah.
It was a...
I think the thing too that I find so interesting is how you can fake loving someone for that long. Like, when someone likes you or not.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's just not that into you.
Yeah.
And
that little look,
or just the dismissiveness of respect or whatever it might be. Like, he was so there. And it was so real. Yeah. And yet it wasn't. And I just think, gosh, the level of investment that he went to pretend to love at that intimate level, because this wasn't just a business deal. Yeah. This was a life we were describing and building and planning. Mm. But it was all just fake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard to comprehend. I think to get the sense of, and I've just pulled a quote out of your book, but to get the sense of your life as of before it all blew up. Mm. On the 11th of July 2017, you're in a good place, and this is how you described your life when you woke up feeling good. Mm. I woke up feeling fulfilled in every life area. Family, tick. Career, tick. Personal growth, tick. Health, tick. Relationship, double tick. Could this be the elusive contentment I've heard so many people speak of? Mm. So that was your mindset on before it all went.
It was, and I'd been through, and the first part of the book talks about this. I'd been through a lot. My dad died really young. I'd been through a divorce. My mum got breast cancer. Yeah. I had a miscarriage. There was a lot that happened, and I had coped with a lot.
Yeah.
And so, the traumatic kind of the separation, the divorce, I'd gotten to a place, 2.5 years after that point where I felt like I'd met someone who, I felt like I was in a relationship like what my parents had.
Yeah.
Which was what I always aspired to. And yeah, I felt like, oh my God, finally things are coming together.
I see that, and I pulled it out as a quote because it's so sad. We've all been in that stage of life where you think, hey, maybe this life is for me. It's all, everything's lined up. Yeah. And then it went tragically south.
Yeah, it did.
You couldn't get in contact with him over a 24-hour period, or there was a text working late and you tried to text him, couldn't text, or you text him, but there was no response. But do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, we'd been to Byron for the weekend. I was up there presenting at a marketing conference and came back. He was up there supporting me. It was great. He drove back after I flew back, and I missed a call from him one morning, but I was busy, like it was school holidays, I was getting kids off to camps and the whole thing, getting into the office. And I spent the rest of the day trying to get back in touch with him and couldn't. And that was very unusual because he was always very responsive. We spoke a lot. And by that night, I was getting pretty worried. And I spent a lot of that night deep in the internet trying to find the phone number of his brother-in-law who I'd met, his sister, his surfing buddies, people that he grew up with, and I knew their company names. So, I reached out to them. So I was doing a lot of outreach overnight and barely slept, and woke up super early the next morning because I still hadn't heard. Called Bondi Police and asked them to do a wellness check on him because I just had a feeling that something was wrong. I thought he'd been in an accident. And while that was happening, Kath called me and she said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm really worried. I haven't slept a wink. Something's happened to Max."
Yep.
She said, "I'm going to send you a link." I said, "Oh my God, he's died. What's happened? There's been an accident. He's surfing out. There's been a shark attack." She said, No. Click on the link and call me back." And I clicked on the link, and it was the Crime Stoppers video of him being arrested outside of his apartment in Bondi. And his face was all blurred out, but of course I knew it was him. Mm. And so I called Bondi Police back and said, "You don't need to do a wellness check on him. He's fine. He's been arrested." And they said, "Yes, we know that. And all the information you gave us about the man that lives at that address is not who lives at that address." And that's when I was like, well, who lives there? What's his name? What is, because the video and the article that was online that morning was just sort of Bondi businessman, 47, superannuation fraud. It was very broad. And what the detectives had hoped with that video was that people like me would see it and then come forward because they didn't have all the victims at that point. But no details had been released. And then that's when I did get in touch with his brother-in-law, and he'd sent me a message saying, call me back urgently on this number, Chris, and in brackets he wrote Hamish's brother-in-law. And that's the first time I saw his name, and I called Chris and I said, "Who the fuck is Hamish?" And he said, "Hamish McLaren." And I said, "Well, who's Max Tavita?" So I was just in this world where I was like, I'd heard this new name. I didn't know him as that. And then, of course, armed with his actual name, I could go into the internet and find a very long and deep history of all of the things that he had been up to.
Okay. Well, look, we might take a break at this point. I'm angry. I'm angry. I can't imagine how it would just be an absolute head spin on trying to comprehend that. So we're going to take a break, and when we get back, we'll talk about how you processed, what you found out, and how your life was from that moment sort of turned upside down. But I think those that have been listening to you talk through understand how the relationship just organically grew, and there weren't warning signs there. Everything seemed perfect, and you're not some naive idiot that just was told a whole pack of lies. You're a smart person, a person that that had the intelligence to suspect someone, but you're just been conned, conned. But okay, I'm going to be fascinated how you did react after finding out the person that you loved and invested your money with didn't even exist.
Buckle up.
Okay, back soon.